Welcome back. Parliament is set to vote on the 2025 budget this Wednesday as partners in the Government of National Unity still meet to find common ground after several parties expressed their concern over a 0.5% VAT increase proposed by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. Let's speak to Professor Susan Booysen. She's Wits University's Emeritus Professor. As we continue to unpack, Prof, the impact of this upcoming budget vote on Wednesday on the Government of National Unity, certainly according to the Democratic Alliance, if it doesn't get an equal say in the budget fortunes of the country, the Government of National Unity may well be at real risk.
Yes, indeed. These are fascinating times and interesting times, necessary times in many ways, for political parties to elaborate their economic policy stances, their budgetary orientations, and in essence, to give better clarity than we've had from the original mid-2024 coalition agreement between the parties. They give better clarity as to what is the expected and the realized power relation between them, because we know the initial coalition negotiations were done in quite a bit of a rush and only agreed to terms in the broadest possible way, with the impact, of course, that the coalition's founding document, a statement of intent, was really so broad that not too many parties would actually be able to disagree from that. And what we see unfolding in this moment of the budget 2025 is that the ANC displayed signs of weakness, and it has to, much more than it has been acting out in the past 8-9 months. And the DA could grab that realization of that weakness, and the weakness is that the ANC could not muster an alternative majority to one with the DA, at least not to the extent that we know so far. And so far, it appears, not yet announced, not yet formalized, but so far it appears as if the DA has been able to get a few concessions on economic policy participation, on a few other legislative aspects, probably maybe even extending to formulations around expropriation. That remains to be confirmed as well. But the DA might have gained a few concessions. Simultaneously, one has to add that these are not finalized content yet. And we hear that the DA has to step back too and recognize that the ANC is negotiating with Action SA and with Booysen, Build One South Africa, Musi Maimane, of course, chairperson, not part of the coalition, but chairperson of the Appropriations Standing Committee on Appropriation in the National Assembly. And so with Action SA, Booysen, and possibly even with Freedom Front. And Freedom Front is an essential part of deliberations, could very well be, because they have come out in support of the ANC recently in several local government coalitions. And for the ANC, of course, they would be able to minimize their concessions to the DA if they can show that without the DA, they can also muster an outright majority of 200 plus 201 in the National Assembly.
So, Professor Booysen, I'm also seeing the report here by News 24 that the ANC and the DA are close to a deal ahead of the parliamentary vote on Wednesday. It's about co-governance for the DA, isn't it? It's not about being a lesser partner in the GNU, but rather the Democratic Alliance wants to be an equal partner alongside the ANC, at least as far as the budget vote is concerned.
Yes, at least. Whether it can be exactly equal, we do not know, but definitely to have a much greater role than it has had so far, because it is quite true. We know the DA has been lamenting it, but we know it is quite true that the DA has been expected to abide by what the president rules in this government of national unity, so-called GNU. And the DA has not been able to play the role that it thinks it is able to play, for example, in a way, it has been pointing that out in recent days as well, the way it has been governing in the Western Cape, for example. So they are looking for a much greater level of influence, possibly in at least some respects equal. We know they have been asking for co-chairing of the Vulindlela project, that joint project between the presidency and the National Treasury. It is actually, I think, almost beyond comprehension that so few of the GNU parties, and the DA is by far the biggest partner to the ANC, have been given so far so little of a role in crucial decision-making in policy matters, whether it is in economic matters and the budget or in many other matters. So this is, in a way, a sobering moment, a supplementary moment of negotiations in supplement of the June 2024 negotiations, which have been incomplete by far.
Yeah. I suppose, with the DA drawing the red line insofar as the budget is concerned, only to hear and no further, or else it risks the collapse of the government of national unity. It was a serious statement by the party, but one that it's made several times before for various other issues. So crying wolf comes to mind, but do you reckon that the budget issue would truly have pushed the GNU over the edge?
Yes, I think the GNU matter came to much more of a challenge with the budget and the VAT issue in this case, because some water has run into the ocean as well in the interim, and the DA probably saw it different matters as of national health insurance, of expropriation, of Bela. Those were matters that were essentially decided by the previous parliament. In DA, I think it exceeds that it could not have expected to have the same kind of influence in those matters as it has in the new matters going forward. And political parties in a GNU are going to be judged by the electorate in terms of what they achieve going forward. And so this was a matter on which the DA, if it was serious about its own credibility, could not have exceeded anymore. And the ANC probably overestimated its ability to make the junior partners in the GNU further rubber stamp its decisions. The ANC never made any secret in recent months of the fact that it sees itself as implementing the ANC election manifesto, for example, not a new policy program developed by the GNU. ANC has really been using the GNU so far to show that it is actually in power, that is the biggest party, that is the party leading the GNU coalition.
Yeah.
And I suppose the DA then, given that this moment presented itself of weakness of the ANC, it couldn't stop itself from grabbing it. And so far, it seems to have been grabbing it. It hasn't got unadulterated new power. I don't think it will have full shared power, 50-50 power with the ANC in the GNU, but I certainly think all signs are there that it will be better respected, that it will have more power. Maybe also more power and better respect to other junior partners in the GNU.
Let's not forget as well, Prof. Booysen, that it's the local government elections next year. Parties are actively campaigning now, right? The ANC has had several briefings. I mean, all parties have had several briefings where they talk about how they're rebuilding municipalities, how they want more checks and balances. The ANC has talked about rebuilding, about renewal again. These are things we've heard many, many times before from the ANC. It was a shock, almost defeat in the elections for the ANC in May last year. I don't think anyone would have actually predicted just scraping by on 40%. And so when we take a look at the history of the ANC losing power, for example, in the Western Cape in 2009, the party has been unable to gain any ground since 2009. That must surely be on the ANC's mind as we go from one election in 2024 to a local government election where the ANC says it's going to try and regrow, rebuild. But what will all of these issues, like the budget, like the GNU, how will it impact the election outcomes next year?
It will certainly impact it in a huge way. The exact ways we cannot yet tell. But we can get our cues from the way the political parties are interacting exactly in the national government of national unity. And we can see that the power relations are changing. And we know from monitoring trends across the three spheres of government, wherever the ANC has lost power or relative power proportions of election outcomes in the past, it has hardly, if ever at all, regained it. Mm-hmm. And so for the ANC, it's really to try to assert itself, show itself as a party that is still able to do things. But on its mind is definitely the likelihood that it will see a further decline at the local level as well, because political parties are really, and that's such a fascinating characteristic of contestation and coalition politics at the local level. In this big project that I am currently doing for Mapungubwe Institute on monitoring the coalition's local, including national and provincial. But at local level, we see that any combination of political parties goes as local government coalitions, irrespective of what we see at the national level. And we also see that irrespective of who partners at the national level, it's free game at the local level.
Right.
Political parties will simultaneously cooperate and contest with everything in their being. So I think that we are already getting very interesting cues as to the type of contest that we'll see in local government elections. In other words, in one phrase, that the fact that parties are in a GNU together does not mean that they're not going to contest and fight each other at the local level with everything at their disposal.
Certainly. Professor Susan Booysen, thanks very much indeed. Some wonderful insight there as we build up to the budget vote, which is taking place on Wednesday.